Ever since we got the Warner Brothers Discovery merger kind of breaking off with AT&T, AT&T admitting they made a mistake, that they didn't want to be an actual media company, that maybe being a communications company was enough. David Zaslav ends up taking over as the CEO. It's been in a state of flux. We've seen cancellations. We've seen lots of announcements of future cancellations and just changing and reconfiguring the way the organization is set up. And we still haven't even got the HBO Max Discovery Plus merger that's supposed to also happen for the streaming platforms. And it's just been really crazy. If you're a DC Comics fan, if you're a DC EU fan, which is no more, there's only the DCU, it's a time to be hopeful that maybe they can get these characters right, that maybe we won't have 5 different versions of Batman running around in movies and television and stuff all at the same time, that maybe there'll be something more streamlined. Obviously, James Gunn just took over as the co-CEO of the DCU, along with Peter Safran, the high-profile producer, and they have a plan. At least they're outlining it. It's a 10-year plan. But will they ever actually get to execute it? I know here on the channel, a lot of times we concentrate on the creative aspects and the plans that they're doing and what could they do with the DCU? What would it take to get this thing right? How can they actually compete with the MCU, which are all very important, apparently, to David Zaslav. He's been talking about it since day one. But there's a dark cloud hanging over Warner Brothers Discovery in the form of an enormous amount of debt and an enormous amount of capital that they're going to have to expend within the next 2 years just to get their situation correct. They're going to have to lose more money before they actually ever make money, which does bring up the question, can Warner Brothers Discovery even survive to even get halfway through this 10-year plan? We know there's already talks in Hollywood kind of behind the scenes that the plan is to get some things right and then sell off Warner Brothers again, which would be like the third time in 6 or 7 years. We shall see if that comes to fruition, but I do think Warner Brothers Discovery is in serious jeopardy. And a lot of other people think that as well. Recently, there's an article from the Wall Street Journal, and they said David Zaslav declared it a bright, shiny day after the deal to merge his cable programming juggernaut Discovery with AT&T's Warner Media closed last April. It's been anything but that for Warner Brothers Discovery and the new chief executive of the media giant. The stock is down almost 50% since the deal closed on April 8th, and the company disclosed it expects to incur as much as $4.3 billion in restructuring charges by the end of 2024. It also has nearly $50 billion in debt. Wells Fargo analyst Stephen Cahall had this to say about Warner Brothers Discovery. We think Warner Brothers Discovery has one of the best assets in media, coupled with one of the worst balance sheets in media. And the recent financial reports regarding their quarterly statements certainly backs that up on the part of Warner Brothers Discovery. And that's really the problem, right? It's not that they don't have good assets. They've got DC, they got Harry Potter, they got Hanna-Barbera, they've got Discovery, they got HBO. They have like all these really cool assets, but they just have this mountain of debt just sitting on top of them. Not only that, they just had the merger of a company that just had a merger. So really Warner Media, the company that they acquired that merged into Discovery, was already kind of bare bones as it was after all the cuts that AT&T made after their acquisition and then subsequent like restructuring of the company. So you already have a company that was kind of at bare bones getting absorbed into another company. So they're going to cut it even more. And then they have this tremendous amount of debt. He needs to save $3 billion in spending. That was the number one priority for David Zaslav, even more of a priority than the DCU competing with the MCU. And then you have $47 billion of debt just sitting over the company. How can they survive? When are they actually going to be financially viable? Disney Plus has more subscribers, way more subscribers than HBO Max, and that will likely still be the case when HBO Max and Discovery Plus actually end up merging. And they can't pull a profit. They're losing billions of dollars off their streaming platform, and they say it's going to take years before they can make a profit. Will we ever actually see the fruition of what James Gunn and Peter Safran want to do with the DCU moving forward, where it's more of a tighter shared continuity and you can really tell these like big expanding stories like they've done in the MCU in the past? And if those weren't enough obstacles for this company to overcome, we also have a lot of things happening right now that are really out of their control, that are exacerbating the situation and making it even more difficult to overcome. A stream of layoffs, departures of top leaders, and budget cuts have sunk morale, several executives said. More than 1,000 people have been let go since April, with more cuts coming. Cord cutting is also eroding confidence in the future of cable networks, of which Warner Brothers Discovery owns more than 24 around the globe. The slowdown in advertising is more bad news. CNN chairman Chris Light told staffers in a memo last week that the state of the economy will result in unsettling changes that, quote, will not be easy because this will affect people, budgets, and projects, unquote. So they're coming into this merger with the big plan to cut $3 billion worth of spending, with $47 billion of debt sitting on top of them. But they also have to spend another like $4 billion just to restructure the company as it is. And now people are cord cutting. They're going to streaming services, which they have two of, right? They got HBO Max and they have Discovery Plus, but they need to merge those. But they also need to keep their assets that they own in cable networks, which are over 24 around the world. They need those to be profitable as well. But you've also got a looming recession, meaning they're going to have to cut more people, but they're also going to want to create just as much, if not more, content moving forward. So it's work smarter, not harder. That's what I was always told in the military, right? When you got a big budget cut, well, that's a lot easier said than done, especially when you have an environment that is rapidly changing, that's fluctuating, and you don't really know what the end state is going to be. Is cable television even going to be a thing in 10 years? I don't think it really will. And what about the state of the movie-going experience? Certainly the pandemic caused some issues there where they had to shut it down and they were releasing stuff on streaming and movies at the exact same time. Just destroyed the box office for a couple of years, though, but it felt like it was rebounding, right? In the early 2022, we had the big Spider-Man movie, we had the big Maverick movie, we had James Bond, we had everything come out in the beginning of 2022. It felt like it was maybe not quite as robust as it was before, but it was rebounding. And then you get to the second half of 2022, and it turns out that maybe it hasn't fully recovered, that maybe people just aren't fully on board with the theater-going experience anymore. Maybe they're not providing enough good entertainment to justify people leaving their houses and spending $30 on popcorn and soda to go actually enjoy the movie as an entire family, which is probably another $80 in tickets and stuff like that. It's become a very strange place. And then they're doing this merger with all this debt and all this money that's outgo, and they're probably not ever going to pull a profit for at least 5 years or something like that. I think there's a really good chance that Warner Brothers Discovery really doesn't make it. And even if they don't want to sell, which is the rumor that they denied, obviously, that was coming out a few months ago, they probably end up having to sell. Because when you're $50 billion in debt, you can only lose more money for so long before people just lose faith in the company and what your vision is, even if you're doing the right thing. And in a lot of cases, I think David Zaslav is doing the right thing. What is interesting is after all these negative things that are happening, some things in their control, some things not in their control, regarding Warner Brothers Discovery and the future of the DCU and all the things that come along with that, is it feels like investors are somewhat confident that they're on the right track. This is what Motley Fool had to say just last week about this. Warner Brothers Discovery came soaring back with news about its superhero content operation. The company named film producer Peter Safran and acclaimed director James Gunn as co-CEOs of DC Studios. For market watchers, the positioning of Gunn in such a central role is a clear signal that, under Zaslav, Warner Brothers Discovery believes it can unlock even more value from its DC superheroes. With Warner Brothers Discovery stock struggling this year, investors may well have questioned the company's long-term prospects, but with restructuring expenses now priced in and a clear vision for its DC content coming into relief, there are signs things may improve over time. And quite frankly, it's nice to see that it's not all bad news, that some people are getting a little bit more optimistic about the long-term outlook of Warner Brothers Discovery, basically due to its plan with the DCU itself. Now, a lot of that probably has to do with James Gunn's reputation when it comes to the MCU. Obviously, Guardians of the Galaxy was an enormous hit. I think Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was also a pretty darn big hit, but the Suicide Squad wasn't a big hit. And I don't think that Peacemaker really brought in a lot of new subscribers to HBO Max, although it was much better than I anticipated it was going to be. It's very entertaining. Certainly takes some shots at some of the bigger heroes in DC Comics, but you know what? That was kind of the tone of the show, and that's the kind of the tone that James Gunn brings to this. Now, obviously, Peter Safran's had some pretty good successes here and there. I believe he was a producer on Aquaman. Also, Shazam, obviously, Aquaman is the big one. There apparently is hope for the future, and it kind of sounds like it all rests on DC Comics, DC characters, the DC universe, and hopefully they take it seriously. They do something amazing, do something to separate it from the MCU, because I don't want MCU light with DC characters. I want something that stays true to the DC characters and what makes DC Comics unique in the landscape of comic books and superheroes and stuff like that. So it's going to be very difficult. They have a black cloud hanging over them, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And shockingly, it's DC Comics. Well, not for the comic books that they're writing, but the stuff in the past that was popular. Because when you look at the stuff that's actually selling when it comes to like graphic novels and stuff, a lot of them are DC stories that have been told 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, are still among the most popular stories in the entire comic book industry, at least in North America at this time. And a lot of those stories have not been translated to the DCEU and are ripe for producing into the DCU moving forward. There is going to be a lot more pain moving forward. In fact, David Zaslav talked about all this debt and what they were going to do. They are actually canceling $2 billion worth of content and programming that they had already funded at this point just to get like tax write-offs and stuff like this. It turns out Batgirl was not special. They're actually cutting costs across the board. If you're a DC fan, we're likely going to have to be patient, but we know this is the focus, the main objective of Warner Brothers Discovery. If they're successful, it's going to be because of the characters we love. Definitely check this one out. If you don't see it there, there's also a link in the video description.